We know little about the spiritual practices that enslaved Africans brought to America, but we know from the music they created, their dance, narratives, and religious beliefs that they were a deeply spiritual people who adapted their inherent beliefs to a European cosmology. The history of yoga practice among Black people in the United States is moving out of the shadows and into the light, observable and documented, a living legacy with ancient beginnings in Africa to its origins in the United States in the early part of the 20th century. On March 3, 1820, the Missouri Compromise Bill, sponsored by Senator Henry Clay of Kentucky, passed in the United States Congress. This legislation admitted Missouri as a slave state and Maine as a free state. The nation was now comprised of 22 states, 11 free, 11 slave. The compromise also forbade the expansion of slavery from all new territories in the Louisiana Purchase, north of the southern boundary of Missouri. This territorial expansion was fueled by the cultivation of cotton. From the 1820s until the beginning of the Civil War, cotton had become the dominant cash crop in the agricultural economy of the South, and it fueled the northern banking system and textile factories. King cotton comprised more than 50% of the total U.S. exports and was of paramount importance to the economies of the United States and Great Britain. Crucial to this vast economy was the free and enforced labor of millions of enslaved Africans in the United States. Transcendentalism as an American literary, political, and philosophical movement developed in the late 1820s and 1830s by a small group of New England intellectuals. The Transcendentalist leaders were essayist Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. They wove elements found in the ancient Vedic texts of the Upanishads, the Vedas, and the Bhagavad Gita, and other world scriptures into their writings and this new movement. In several essays, Emerson popularized the Indian metaphysical beliefs that the world, God, and human beings all participated in one substance, and that beyond the illusion of matter lay the reality of the spirit. The Transcendentalists saw slavery as inherently wrong because it crushed the spiritual development of slaves. They protested against slavery in various ways, but for the most part, the Transcendentalists were largely comprised of college-educated New Englanders, including writer Louisa May Alcott and her father Bronson Alcott, feminist Margaret Fuller, and the poet Walt Whitman. None of them had any significant connection to or interactions with the enslaved population. The Theosophical Society was founded in New York City in 1875 by Henry Still Olcott, William Kwan, and Ukrainian-born Madame Helena P. Blavatsky. The Society's motto was, "There is no religion higher than truth." Theosophers wanted to understand the mysterious origins and interconnectedness between the universe, humanity, and the divine. Madame Blavatsky's magnum opus, The Secret Doctrine, was published in 1888. It is the major foundational work of Theosophy. Blavatsky and Olcott, who served as the Society's first president, moved from New York to Bombay, India in 1878, where they established the international headquarters of the Society in Adyar, a suburb of Madras. The Theosophical Society Adyar was closely linked to the Indian independence movement and established headquarters across the street from the Indian National Congress. The Congress was founded in 1885 by Indian and British members of the Theosophical Society movement, including Scotsman Alan Octavian Hume. Associations developed between the leaders of both organizations. After the First World War, Mahatma Gandhi became the president of the Congress, and he remained its unofficial spiritual leader and icon until his death by assassination in January 1948. Employing the yogic principle of ahimsa, or nonviolence, Gandhi led India to independence. The Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was strongly influenced by Gandhi's nonviolent resistance in his leadership of the modern-day civil rights movement in the mid-20th century. Helena Blavatsky is recognized as the greatest occultist in Western civilization. After her death in 1891, her works were expanded or reinterpreted by the leading theosophists of the day, such as A.P. Stennett, Charles Ledbetter, and his discovery, Jaddu Krishnamurti. Other groups arose from teachings loosely based on the theosophical doctrines, such as the Ascended Master teachings, the I Am activity advanced by former theosophist Alice Bailey, which continues today, led by Patricia Cota Robles. Theosophy formed the foundation of the present-day New Age movement. Vivekananda was the first Hindu monk to travel to the United States. With the assistance of Professor John Henry Wright of Harvard, he was invited to speak at the 1893 Congress of World Religions in Chicago as part of the World's Fair. A disciple of the Indian mystic Ramakrishna, he introduced the philosophies of Vedanta and yoga to the Western world. Annie Besant became president of the Theosophical Society in 1909, the same year the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People was founded by W.E.B. Du Bois. In July 1911, they were the only two Americans invited to attend the Universal Races Congress in London. The event, organized by Gustav Spiller of the Ethical Culture Movement, was to discuss race relations and relations between East and West. There is evidence to suggest that theosophical ideology developed among Black people as they migrated from the South. Figures such as Father Divine and Sweet Daddy Grace, and the metaphysical orientation of groups such as Church of the Living God and Black Freemasonry were concepts filtered into the spiritual philosophies of several Black religions. Noble Drew Ali migrated from the South between 1890 and 1930, as did nearly half the Black population. He settled in Newark, New Jersey, and attended Masonic lodges. He joined the Theosophical Society, which included Muhammad Alexander Russell Webb, a prominent convert to Islam and a proponent of Eastern religious thought. He founded the Moorish Science Temple in Newark, New Jersey in 1913. He relocated to Chicago and established a center there, as well as temples in other major cities. Wallace D. Fard, founder of the Nation of Islam, had been a member of the Theosophical Society in San Francisco, a member of the Moorish Science Temple, and Marcus Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association. A young Elijah Poole heard him teach for the first time in 1931, and soon the two became inseparable. Poole would become the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, leader of the Nation of Islam, between 1934 and 1975. The Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 had left blacks in the South not much better off than they had been during slavery. Many were bound to plantations they had worked as sharecroppers, which kept them in debt to their former owners. During Reconstruction, the newly freed people could exercise certain rights previously denied them, such as voting, marriage, and education. But hostilities rose among Southern whites as they felt the sting of economic depression and defeat by the North. Seeking a scapegoat, they began to systematically undo the opportunities accorded freed slaves. A system was ultimately created based solely on race, which relegated the masses of blacks to a caste of second-class citizenship. This system of legal segregation became law in 1896 with the landmark case of Plessy versus Ferguson. The Supreme Court decision, written by Associate Justice Henry Billings Brown of Louisiana, upheld the constitutionality of segregation under the doctrine of separate but equal. This cruel and oppressive system would be known as Jim Crow, and under its weight of unfairness and injustice, large numbers of blacks began to escape the South.
My heart gives a chill, I feel such a thrill, my feet won't keep still when they swing that music. Rhythm like that puts me in a trance, or you can't blame
The
me
destination
for wanting
that
to
captured
dance.
the
From what I
imagination of
understand,
blacks
it must
leaving
be
the
just
South
grand to
was
play the
Harlem,
band
New York
when
City,
they swing that
ushering
music.
in the
I'm just
age
happy
of the
as
new
can be
Negro.
when they swing that music for me.
The writer Jean Toomer was born Nathan Pinchback Toomer the day after Christmas in Washington, D.C. in 1894. His grandfather, Pinckney Benton Stewart Pinchback of Louisiana, was the first U.S. governor of African descent during Reconstruction. Toomer could easily pass for white, his heritage comprising several European and African bloodlines, and throughout his formative years until age 18, he lived alternately as white and as an African American. In the 1920s, Toomer was introduced to the philosophy of idealism, which brought him into contact with a new body of ideas rooted in Eastern teachings, Buddhist philosophy, occultism, and theosophy. Toomer spent 2 months living in Georgia as an African American in the rural South. He used this newly found identification to create the poems, prose, and short stories in his master work, Cain, published in 1923. After the publication of Cain, Toomer began studying the austere idealism of George Ivanovich Gurdjieff, a Greek-born mystic, and for several years in the mid-1920s, he attended the Gurdjieff Institute for Harmonious Development at the Château de Prieuré in Fontainebleau, France. As an idealist philosopher, Toomer formulated theories of being and consciousness, and when he returned to writing, he sought literary peers for his idealism, such as Nella Larson, Wallace Thurman, George Schuyler, and Zora Neale Hurston. These Harlem Gurdjieffians attempted to change the structure of American culture through the development of the harmonious self beyond the category of race. Paramhansa Yogananda was born Mukunda Lal Ghosh in Uttar Pradesh, India, January 5, 1893, the same year of Vivekananda's first trip to the United States. Young Mukunda's spiritual awareness and experience was beyond the ordinary. He sought out many teachers, and at the age of 17, he met his guru, Swami Yukteswar Giri, in 1910. In August 1920, Paramhansa Yogananda left India on the City of Sparta, the first passenger boat sailing for America after the close of World War I. The 2-month voyage brought him to Boston as the Indian delegate to an international congress of religious liberals. He remained in America after the Congress was over, living primarily in Boston. He founded the Self-Realization Fellowship to disseminate worldwide his teachings on India's ancient practices and the philosophy of yoga and its tradition of meditation. He lectured and toured along the East Coast before embarking on a cross-country tour of the U.S. in the summer of 1924. Yogananda was the first Hindu teacher of yoga to spend a major portion of his life in America. In 1926, he was invited to give a teaching in Washington, D.C., only to find that African Americans were not allowed to attend. In response, he initiated a study group specifically for them. The location of the meeting and the topic of his teaching remains unknown. In 1935, Yogananda returned to India, and while there, his guru, Yukteswar, died. Before his passing, he gave Yogananda the spiritual name Paramhansa, which means Supreme Swan, a title indicating the highest spiritual attainment. In 1946, Yogananda published his life story, Autobiography of a Yogi. It has since been translated into 42 languages and was designated one of the most important spiritual books of the 20th century. Direct African American cultural encounters with India occurred in 1935 when the Reverend Howard Thurman, with his wife, musician, and social historian Sue Thurman, led the Christian Negro delegation to India, where they were met by Mahatma Gandhi and talked at length about religion, colonialism, and racial issues in the United States. Howard Thurman's subsequent writings were greatly influenced by Gandhi's commitment to nonviolence. Thurman's work in turn influenced Martin Luther King Jr., who was said to have carried a copy of Thurman's 1949 Jesus and the Disinherited in his briefcase. Sue Thurman went on to lecture about Indian civilization and raised funds in those lectures so that several African American women could study at the school of the Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore in West Bengal. In later years, Howard Thurman founded one of the first racially integrated churches in the United States, the Church for the Fellowship of All Peoples in San Francisco. The 1929 crash of Wall Street was followed by years of economic depression. By 1932, half the African American population was out of work. Blacks were systematically eliminated from jobs that were reapportioned to white workers. World War II deepened the recession, and many black men and women enlisted to serve. As they returned home from the war, a new activism emerged, and the roots of protests began to grow. Renewed demands for civil rights and the beginning of the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union gave rise to a toxic political climate dominated by the Red Scare, an anxiety and fear of communism fueled by Senator Joseph R. McCarthy, a Republican from Wisconsin. He spearheaded the creation of the House of Un-American Activities Committee in 1947 and held hearings intended to uncover communists in the United States. Many artists known for their political activism were targeted. Anything considered against conventional American beliefs was labeled communist, and many black leaders, intellectuals, and entertainers were stripped of their ability to work and earn a living. Practices in yoga, metaphysics, and alternative lifestyles went deeply underground. Yoga emerged from this dark period with celebrities such as legendary cowboy of black westerns Herb Jeffries, a follower of Yogananda, and singer-actress Eartha Kitt, who practiced yoga regularly. Never was there a more perfect union of yoga philosophy and African spirituality than the musical expressions of John and Alice Coltrane. Few people are aware of Alice Coltrane's role as a guru or of her musical ministry. She is known primarily as a jazz pianist and harpist, and mostly as the widow of saxophonist and composer John Coltrane. Alice MacLeod was born August 27, 1937, in Detroit, Michigan. She was a child prodigy who played piano in her church through the 1940s and 1950s. She met John Coltrane for the first time at Birdland in New York City in 1963. She was highly impressed by his calm mannerisms. They shared common interests in music and art, yoga, vegetarianism, and so much more. They married in 1965, and together they embarked on a deeply spiritual journey of musical exploration and forged a new genre of musical expression. They explored meditation and a universalist approach to religion. Alice replaced McCoy Tyner as pianist with the John Coltrane Quartet and continued to play and record with the band until John's death on July 17, 1967. Left to raise their 4 small children, Alice's life significantly changed. On her journey as a seeker of spiritual truth, she spent time in isolation, fasting, praying, and meditating. In 1970, bassist Vishnu Wood introduced her to Swami Satchidananda, and through him she discovered the philosophical and spiritual teachings of the Vedas. She recorded the album Journey in Satchidananda and traveled to India for the first time. In later years, she became a follower of Satya Sai Baba. She describes the extraordinary spiritual experiences of tapas or austerity that she underwent in her book, Monument Eternal. She had a revelation in 1976 in which she was instructed to become a Swami. Alice dedicated her life to God and took on the name Turiya, which means state of pure consciousness. She founded the Vedantic Center in 1972, and in 1983 later established Shanti Anantam Ashram, a spiritual community in the Santa Monica Mountains of Southern California. She served as spiritual director for the ashram and regularly delivered discourses and led the members in devotional song for services. Like John and Alice Coltrane, saxophonist Sonny Rollins infused Eastern spirituality into his jazz improvisations. As a musician on the jazz scene, he experienced the pitfalls that come with that lifestyle, and he sought a spiritual dimension to transform his life. In 1967, he found his way to the mission run by Swami Chinmayananda in Poway, India. While living at the ashram, he focused on karma and bhakti yoga, and he left India with a clear understanding of his path to use music as a force for good. Now 86 years old, Rollins still performs and maintains a daily asana practice. Yoga began to move into the mainstream in the 1970s. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who developed transcendental meditation and achieved fame as the guru of the Beatles, the Beach Boys, and other celebrities, and the music of Indian sitarist Ravi Shankar, were popularized. Black celebrities were also practicing yoga and meditation. Ebony magazine featured an article about yoga in September 1975 titled, "Yoga, Something for Everyone. Blacks are joining quest for peace of mind." The article featured photographs of singer Freda Payne and actress Madge Sinclair in a yoga class, as well as other celebrity practitioners. Political activist and philosopher Angela Davis became a committed yogi while being held in the Marin County Women's Detention Center in California in 1970 for kidnapping and first-degree murder. While in prison, a doctor working with the Black Panther Party passed along a book on yoga to help her deal with chronic headaches. The posture she practiced worked, and she continues today with her sunrise salutations. Over the years, yoga practice continued to spread among the Black elite, from musicians to moguls to models and athletes, with little fanfare or notoriety. However, the beginnings of an evolution of spirit were quietly underway. But outside the world of celebrity, there have always been those people in every community who bring a pioneering spirit, open to exploration and new ways of thinking and being. In yoga, there are the unheralded Black trailblazers and innovators who elevate and educate everyday people. The supporters of Black yoga teachers and the communities they serve have come from all walks of life, offering their intellect and scholarship and their financial and spiritual support. And a new breed of energetic, vibrant, and well-trained yoga teachers is taking yoga to new and diverse places and spaces around the world. Yogi Bhajan believed yoga could be an inner approach to many of the dilemmas that Black people confront. As a devoted sadhaka, Krishnakar has made her guru's perspective a movement to help Black people around the world realize that power really is on the level of the mind and not the body. Krishnakar Khalsa was born Thelma Oliver in Los Angeles, California on May 6, 1941. She studied dance and theater arts and in 1961 moved east to pursue a career in the performing arts. As a young rising star, she acted in several films and performed both on and off Broadway. She met Yogi Bhajan in 1970 and began her journey into Kundalini Yoga and the Sikh tradition. She became a yoga teacher with a mission to serve the Black community. Yogi Bhajan gave her the spiritual name Krishnakar, which means divine princess. In August 1980, Krishna made history when she became the first and only woman to have ever sung Sikh hymns at the Harinandir Sahib, or Golden Temple, in Amritsar, India. In the 1990s, Krishna played a key role in the founding of the International Association of Black Yoga Teachers and served as its president until its end. Under her leadership, she organized trips to Cuba and West Africa to expand the connection of Black yoga teachers with the global community. As part of her unflinching passion to serve youth, she started Yoga for Youth, an organization dedicated to supporting young people caught in the juvenile justice system, and she currently serves as chairman of the board. Krishna has never stopped sharing her talents and performing. In 2014, she released an album, One Creator. She continues to love, teach, and serve the yoga community in the African diaspora. It is upon her shoulders the Black Yoga Teachers Alliance proudly stands, and with dedication and determination, we will revive the healing spirit of the ancestors, taking it out of the shadows and into the light.